describe what they look like?
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference, except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing. The situation is that you have various types of what we normally call grays. We didn't call them grays in the military, but you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid. Now this created a situation where the scientific community was trying to figure out why that would be the case, because you would expect that if life evolved on other planets, that they would take on some type of other being, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance, and that creates a question that yet has to be answered by science.
Hybrids. And I believe that this was Satan's strategy to try to corrupt the human line, to try to avert any possibility of a redeemer. And we'll talk more about that as it goes. So this is what's called the angel view of Genesis 6. And we'll get into this more, but if this is valid, we would expect, this is a very strange idea, I grant you. But if this is valid, we would find it confirmed in the New Testament. Things are always confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses.
There's something interesting about the human mind. You can adjust an awful lot of stuff. You can adjust to a lot of things that would terrify you to begin with. After a while, they become common and ordinary.
So you mean contact with the supernatural can become commonplace and ordinary and doesn't bother anybody?
Yeah.
In other words, the more that you do it, you're not uncomfortable.
That's right.
It's just not an uneasy feeling.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about it?
Then I got into a secret society that worshiped the spirits, you see.
Okay, now how is that different from the seance, Roger?
It happens that the seance are not involving in many ways. But when you get into a secret society of spirit worshippers, then, and especially when you're invited there by the direction of the higher-ups in the spirit world, you never get out of there alive. And this is exactly what my friend and I were up against. We didn't know anything about it. And there was a
There have been polls conducted, Gallup polls, one poll called the Roper poll, where the results were extrapolated and sent to over 150,000 American GPs, medical practitioners, that basically said it's almost at epidemic proportions. They estimate that up to 4 million Americans may have had an alien abduction experience, as they believe. And then you've really got to wonder, why is the nature of it so deceptive? You know, if they're really here to help us, as some of these contacts claim, you know, why do they go around acting deceptively? Why do they stealthily abduct people in the middle of the night? And, you know, when I say it was confronting, there was some subject matter that was particularly disturbing. You know, people claim they've been taken onto a spaceship and probed in all parts of their bodies. There are sexual encounters. There seems to be some sort of almost ritual abuse that's going on. So you've got to ask, why would advanced, you know, evolved creatures, you know, kidnap people in the middle of the night and do these horrible things to them, and yet say, you know, we're here to help you evolve? And it's interesting that, you know, we'd like to apply, if you like, a scientific tag to it, but quite simply it seems that these creatures claim that they fly millions of light years across the universe to basically deny the Bible, Christianity, and teach us almost New Age beliefs. Why would advanced extraterrestrials come just to teach us religious messages? And it seems to me, and again the researchers will show you, that the messages being received are deceptive in nature. They will tell you things like, well, you know, we've come from Venus or Mars. In the 60s, that was the messages. Well, we now know that's impossible. Now they say they come from Sirius or Orion or Zeta Reticuli or somewhere far off, where we can't test those claims. And that's the problem. And some of the stories they've told us, like that, we know to be demonstrably not true. And if someone comes to you, Chris, and tells you a story and does all these things and says, I'm here to help you, but then does brutal things to you and then lies to you, then I don't think trust is a good place to start. Let me just talk about abductions, because as I said, that's where I think we can unpick it. People that claim these abduction experiences say that little grey entities enter their room in the middle of the night and they see them pass through the walls, or they see them enter through the ceiling. And then these people who believe that they've had some real physical experience claim they're taken through the walls. Now, you and I know that can't be happening, but these people are having a real experience. But the question is it really aliens? Now, my conclusion there is I don't believe it is. All sorts of complex designs. These first appeared in the late 60s, I think early 70s in the south of England. And they were a pretty simple design, and then they got more and more complex. And some of the hyperbole that's followed these, and you've heard some of this stuff, they are so precise and so exact, they could not have been man-made. The stalks have been bent in such a fashion, they've not been broken. We don't know any technology that can do that. There's leftover radiation. The cellular structure of the corn stalks or the wheat stalks or whatever it is have been changed. We've heard stories like that. But in the 1980s, two elderly gentlemen by the name of Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley stepped forward and claimed responsibility for all the crop circles that appeared, you know, in that early period. Now, they multiplied all over the world, so the first thing you need to realize, even though there are experts called seriologists, okay, serious field studies in this, that say they were created by aliens, just average Joe Blows like you or me gathered that it could be made, and they started replicating it all around the world. And Doug and Dave, when they came out and took credit for them, they were debunked. Here's how they make them. You can go to this website, circlemakers.org, and that's how they make them. Look at this, folks, a plank and 2 bits of rope. That is the most common and effective method used by people all over the world in making crop circles. However, there is a sinister side to it. And the circle makers, and again, look for yourself, you go to their website, their name originally was Team Satan. And you would wonder why somebody would call themselves Team Satan. I mean, they're in this for business now. Obviously, it was politically incorrect and they changed it. But why would a group of people call themselves Team Satan? Well, when you investigate their website, you'll see that they say when they build these crop circles, they have all sorts of paranormal experiences. People have had healings. There's been radio interruptions. Lights have appeared in the sky. And so they don't believe that it's UFOs. They just think it is some sort of psychic or paranormal experience. I mean, for example, I was in Canada recently, I turned on the Sci-Fi channel, and there was a woman channeling a message from an alien being. And she was saying from this alien being that we've evolved to such a state that you couldn't see me. My atoms move so fast that if you were to pass your hand through my body, if you were to try to touch me, your hand would pass right through my body. And so people are dabbling in some sort of what they think is some sort of pseudo-technology when it's really opening a doorway to the occult.
Va, uno, y ahí van los atrás, siguientes.
¿Qué es eso, Dios mío?
¿Se anda correteando?
¿Qué es eso? A ver, trata de enfocar.
Máximo.
Ok, no dejes que lo dejes atrás. Ok.
Van.
Sigue ese, no lo dejes, no.
Qué barbaridad,
Ahí se van a ver bien, pues. Y van a una velocidad, pero... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 en la pantalla.
Síguelo, no lo cierras.
¿Están a la misma altura Telles?
Afirmativo.
Un poquito, arriba.
8, 9, 10, 11 contando toda la cola. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11.
Ok, no sabemos qué estamos viendo, son unos objetos nada más luminosos que vienen a la misma altura que nosotros.
Ufologist Don Elkins made the following observation. I have found that some people can achieve the contact phenomenon simply by being hypnotized, and the same general message permeates over 90% of the millions of words received by thousands of people around the world.
No one knows what hypnosis is. No one knows what goes on in the mind. It's all altered state of consciousness like yogis and witch doctors have been practicing. It loosens the normal connection between your spirit and your brain, and of course if the hypnotist can control you, make all kinds of suggestions, make you think things are happening that are not happening, make you think you have powers that you don't, experiences that you haven't, even implant memories. Other beings, if there are other minds out there, they could also do the same thing. Sir John Eccles, Nobel Prize winner for his research on the brain, describes the brain as, quote, a machine that a ghost can operate, unquote. What he means by that is your spirit operates your brain in a normal state of consciousness. In an altered state, reached under yoga, a TM, hypnosis, you have loosened the normal connection between your spirit and your brain, and that allows another spirit, other entities, other minds to interpose themselves and begin to tick off the neurons in your brain, create a universe of illusion. I believe that it's demonic. I think all of the evidence indicates this.
Some people claim that by allowing themselves to be put into an hypnotic trance, they are acting as a channeling device in which the extraterrestrial being speaks through them. The following is an actual sampling of those messages. We come from the Interplanetary Confederation of Solar Systems, and our purpose is to aid our brother man on the planet Earth as the New Age dawns. The teacher that was known to you as Jesus was able to use many more of the abilities than the people of this planet. Unfortunately, man upon planet Earth has misinterpreted the meaning of this man's life. He was no different from any of you. He was simply able to remember certain principles. These principles may be realized by anyone at any time. It is only necessary that you avail yourself to our contact through meditation in order to begin to re-realize that which is rightfully yours. UFO researcher John Weldon then offers this question. How credible is it to think that literally thousands of genuine extraterrestrials would fly millions of light years simply to teach New Age philosophy, deny Christianity, and support the occult? And why would the entities actually possess and inhabit people just like demons do if they were really advanced extraterrestrials? Dr. Pierre Guérin, an eminent scientist associated with the French National Council for Scientific Research, concludes that UFO behavior is more akin to magic than to physics as we know it, and that modern UFO nuts and the demons of past days are probably identical.
You can literally hypnotize a person, tell them that there's a cat in their lap, they will see it, they will hear it, purr, they will pet it and feel it. It's not physically there. You tell the cat to scratch them, you know, and bring them out of it. There are scratch marks on their cheek. A non-physical object, under the right conditions, can leave physical evidence. I think it's demonic. It's a spiritual power of some kind for which there is no physical explanation. You can't explain it with the laws of chemistry and physics as we know it. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that first film that came out about UFOs, the house that the mother and little boy were living in, you know, the toys began running around and screws unscrew them in the presence of UFOs. What the film was saying was the same people that run UFOs run haunted houses. And I would say that's absolutely true.
In 1969, the United States Printing Office issued a 400-page publication entitled UFOs and Related Subjects, an Annotated Bibliography. The author was the senior bibliographer for the Library of Congress, Miss Lynn E. Cateau. During her research, she read over 1,000 articles, books, and other literature. She summarizes her findings in the preface of the bibliography. A large part of the available UFO literature is closely linked with mysticism and the metaphysical. It deals with subjects like mental telepathy, automatic writing, and invisible entities, as well as phenomenon like poltergeist manifestations and possession. Many of the UFO reports now being published in the popular press recount alleged incidents that are strikingly similar to demonic possession and psychic phenomenon that have long been known to theologians and parapsychologists. This document was compiled for the United States Air Force and is now in the Library of Congress. Dr. Jacques Vallée has addressed the United Nations on UFOs and was the model for Lacombe in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He is the author of 8 books on UFOs and has been widely recognized as the premier investigating scientist in the realm of UFO research. In his book, Messengers of Deception, Vallée says, an impressive parallel can be made between UFO occupants and the popular conception of demons. And in his book, Confrontations, he writes, the medical examinations to which abductees are said to be subjected, often accompanied by sadistic sexual manipulation, is reminiscent of the medieval tales of encounters with demons. He also made this statement, I believe that when we speak of UFO sightings as instances of space visitations, we are looking at the phenomenon on the wrong level. We are not dealing with successive waves of visitations from space. We are dealing with a control system. And he states, UFOs are the means through which man's concepts are being rearranged. They are engaging in a worldwide enterprise of subliminal seduction.
Jacques Vallée, at least at that time when he wrote that book, was an agnostic. Interesting that he comes to basically the same conclusions I do as a Christian from my research. And he said about UFOs, they're real, but they're not physical. They're messengers of deception. And this was based on his research of about 20 years. They seem to be psychologically preparing, setting us up for some ultimate delusion that is too horrible even to imagine as yet. I would agree with that.
Big question, especially for Christians, is this. Are UFOs for real? In a manner of speaking, yes. One cannot deny either the numerous sightings or the miles of video presented by normally competent professional people. UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. Whether or not a UFO is from outer space is another question entirely. I find it particularly interesting that this latest crop of UFO stories paints them as benevolent guardians. I believe UFOs are real and that their source is supernatural, but not from some distant galaxy as usually presumed. The Bible speaks of fallen angels or demons that have great powers. It reveals that apart from divine restraint, they can manifest themselves in a human form and materialize advanced vehicles. Prophecy predicts that God's restraint of those malevolent people will be removed in the last days. Just imagine what would happen if a UFO were to suddenly land in New York and demand to be taken to see the UN ambassador to outer space aliens. Actually, you don't have to imagine. That's the plot line for dozens, if not scores, of past movies and television series. Aliens arrive promising such things to mankind as the elimination of war, removal of poverty, the cure for dreaded diseases, and techniques that will make it possible to feed billions of people.
You know what? I think that if there was some sort of an alien infestation,
the government would be the first to let you know.
The government would let us know. You know, that's how we know we live in a free land, because there's no secret. They'd say, hey, duck and cover.
A spectacular sign appeared in the sky, a woman dressed with the sun, who had the moon under her feet and a victor's crown of 12 stars on her head. Then another sign appeared in the sky, a huge red dragon. Then a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and its angels fought back. But it was not strong enough, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The huge dragon was thrown down. That ancient serpent, called Devil and Satan, and its angels were thrown down with it.
Calls the Greys. You know, they weren't trying to contact them by radio or whatever, you know, radio waves or anything like that. It was literally, you know, invoking and using ancient rites and rituals. And the story was, you know, that they didn't necessarily come through in nuts and bolts craft. The group actually came to believe over time that, you know, this was more of like a hologram type thing, that these weren't sort of flesh and blood entities. They were almost like a demonic intelligence, if you like, that in some cases weren't even sort of, you know, had physical form, although they could manifest physically in some respects, that the group believed. So in other words, the idea was that this portal was opened. Now, by portal, you know, in simplistic terms, we're talking about a gateway to another realm that some people would quite possibly correctly, you know, would suggest was like another dimension. But the group concluded it was literally like a doorway or portal to hell, and allowed these entities to come through in like a deceptive mode of extraterrestrials. And then it was a case of, well, you know, we can actually learn quite a bit if we can harness their powers.
And of course, there's also the gray aliens. Okay, now once again, when you start listening to these people's accounts, you'll see that time and time again, a lot of people are experiencing the gray aliens. Now, you know, we've heard about this, and there's plenty of movies out there about this, about people's real life experiences, but it's the whole alien abduction phenomenon, right? Well, that also ties in to the sleep paralysis, to these events.
Able to see the UFO phenomenon through another set of eyes. And then in 1996, I was shown the true gospel, where it actually caught my attention, and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior in November of 1996, and now I was able to look at this phenomenon in yet another set of eyes. So initially, was this what I was looking for? No, it was not. Well, the first case I came across, I actually had interviewed this gentleman who claimed to have had an abduction experience, along with other sighting experiences and other what he felt were abduction experiences too. But we decided to interview him, and this was 6 months before I became a Christian. This was in the middle of 1996 that we did the interview with him. And he used to come to my monthly meetings, my MUFON meetings that I had, and he just wanted to share what he had been through, you know, and he had an interest because of his experiences in the UFO phenomenon. And myself and one of my lead investigators, actually my partner that helped me found CE4 in the very beginning, his name was Wes Clark. He was a very good investigator, worked for the Space Center at the time as a quality inspector, and he had a good organizational skill of helping do these investigations. And him and I interviewed this gentleman in his home for 2 hours on videotape, and just let him talk, and we asked some questions and would guide him along just to try to get all of his information. Well, we put it away, and we didn't see anything unusual at the time, and that was interesting in itself that we didn't catch this. But when I became a believer in November of 96, I was ready to put all of this away, because God showed me what this UFO experience was about, that there was a evil demonic side to it. And I felt that as a new Christian and wanting to do the things that God asked of me, that we shouldn't be involved in this, and I'd put it away. And God says, no, I got plans for you, and you need to take this message back to, you know, where you came from. And I said, you know, I can't take the Word of God back to these New Age people. I said, they don't believe it to be the inerrant Word of God. As a matter of fact, they don't even believe in God being a personal being, an entity that they can relate to. So I said, you got to give me something better. And nobody told me that as a new Christian you don't talk to God like that, but I did, not knowing any better. And he answered, and he says, guess what? You already have it. You just haven't seen it. And I couldn't understand what that meant at first. So I asked my partner, Wes, who was a Christian at the time, and I said, we've got something here somewhere that we need to go back and look at. We went back and looked at some of the cases that we had, and we pulled this particular one back out. It was a gentleman named Bill D. We pulled his video back out, plugged it into the VCR, and sat back and started watching and went, oh my. Do you remember hearing this? And Wes says, I don't. And we were sitting right there watching the gentleman and listening to him. But yet we were blinded and deafened at the time we did the recording. Nothing registered until this time when God said, go back and look, you already have it. And what he shared was an experience, atypical, abduction type experience, where he had been taken, experienced being taken, and immediately panicked and in fear. And he himself, actually just being a brand new Christian, called out during this panic experience in saying, Jesus, Jesus, help me. And when he did that, in an instant, the experience abruptly stopped. And he felt like he was thrown back into his bed. He even startled his wife. She asked him why he was jumping on the bed. And he said, when he shared that experience, he didn't understand what it meant. And when we heard that, we knew we had something. Because never before, in all the studies we had done of the other work that the top researchers had done in the country, this was 15 years ago, the big names, never before had anybody said that an experience could be stopped.
Satan knows what's coming, so he has to get the stage set. And you might think of it, before the curtain goes up, you've got to have the actors in place. Everyone needs to know their lines. The props have to be on stage. He doesn't know when the curtain is going to go up, but he has to have everything ready so that when it does, everything is ready to go. So the people knowing their lines and such are the channelers, people who claim that they are receiving messages from aliens. Now, I believe they really are receiving messages, but they're not from aliens. They're from demons who are pretending to be aliens, the people of Ashtar, who is just the same old demon now recycled into becoming the leader of the Galactic Federation and this nonsense. But people like Barbara Marcinak and Therill and others are receiving these messages where they're told that a time of great cataclysms is going to come upon the world. It's going to look like the birds and the fish are leaving planet Earth. Isn't it amazing that we see birds falling out of the sky by the hundreds of thousands, and you see dead fish on shores around the world by the millions? And yet this has been predicted by the aliens, you see. And they use things like people are going to be taken away in the twinkling of an eye. I mean, they're using terminology that Jesus used to begin with, right?
Except they've got a reverse view of the rapture.
Exactly.
In other words, we look at this as going home to be with the Lord. He's going to come down into the atmospheric heavens and he's going to pick us up.
Yes.
But that's not their view exactly.
Well, it's really the mirror image. And I think a lot can be gained by studying the mirror image. I mean, we know the truth in the Bible, but now let's look at the mirror image that the enemy is presenting to us. And what it does is, first of all, it confirms that the rapture is going to happen. And it confirms that a lot of people are going to be taken off the planet. And so to use their words, looking at the mirror image, is that if the people on Earth don't change and become more in harmony with planet Earth, which is all this green movement stuff, if we don't start paying attention to Mother Earth, etc., then Mother Earth in her own love for herself is going to purge herself. That's one scenario. The other is these aliens are going to save mankind when we are in our time of greatest trial, when we're about to just mess ourselves up. And so what I see happening is we're going to have an event known as World War III. biblically, that's the war of Gog and Magog. And this is it's gonna happen. The world will say this is the apocalypse, etc. Which it's not, though, really. It's just the pregame. And then, right after that, we will be raptured. But again, those on the planet are not going to say, oh, the rapture just happened, because there's going to be a strong delusion that they should believe the lie. We see in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The strong delusion is that the aliens took all the believers onto their spaceships. You see, the people that are taken, according to these alien channelers, the people that are taken are the ones that don't fit in here any longer. They're the people that cannot or will not evolve to the fourth dimension. And they're going to either remain in the third dimension, or they're going to be taken by the aliens up to the motherships, levitated away, they say, to be reprogrammed, and then they'll come back, as will the animals that are currently dying. They say that they're going to come back, these other people will come back, and they'll come back as, citizens ready for the new order.
Wow. Amazing, because this happened ages ago already. We have false prophets in the Old Testament who spoke the words of false gods, and we had an event in which alien entities came down from the heavens and tinkered with mankind's DNA and so forth. So really we're seeing a revisitation of an ancient Bible theme, and it's been popularized. It's in pop culture, it's in the movies, it's in novels. It's amazing how people really, I think, want aliens.
And how could anyone keep quiet knowing that they had seen documentation, official government documents labeled top secret, that expressed that these extraterrestrials were real and had visited this earth? I wanted to know just how true all of this was, and I began a program of research to find out if extraterrestrials were real. The first thing I did was collect every bit of documentation that I could find, both from the Freedom of Information Act, from the research of others, from books that had been printed on the subject of UFOs, and of course through my network of friends in the intelligence community. What I discovered was amazing. What I discovered, ladies and gentlemen, is that there has been a plan in existence since about 1917, and probably before that, to create an artificial extraterrestrial threat to this Earth in order to create a one-world totalitarian.
A Melbourne, Australia television reporter said his crew filmed UFOs for 7 minutes Saturday night over the eastern region of New Zealand's South Island.
I accept as fact rather than as theory.
What are those?
Well, some of them include, for instance, the fact that we don't know, there is no evidence. It is a fact we do not know where these creatures come from or what, in fact, their true nature is. In other words, I have not found any of the theories to explain their origin or their nature to be overwhelmingly proven by the data.
Let me try approaching it, though, from the other angle. Are you convinced, Doctor, through your research, that this is a hidden hand, that there are aliens, no matter where they may come from, who are here?
Yes, I have personally experienced it. It's a matter of knowledge and experience with me, not even a conjecture.
Not even a question?
No, no question. What they are, I cannot tell you, and I don't think anyone else can either, but they're not us.
And as to their purpose, all you're sure of is you don't know.
Well, on my list of facts, number 2 on the list is that at least some of these creatures are consummate liars and deceivers. This is a fact. There is no doubt, and the evidence goes back to the beginning of the contactee scenario all the way through reports I've gotten in the last week from cases that are ongoing now.
All right, give me a good example. What makes you believe they are consummate liars?
Well, they have made over the years to particular individuals a number of very specific predictions or warnings or scenarios that have never come to pass. Sometimes small events that they predict in the beginning of a list of warnings or predictions will occur, which makes the person who's received this list of predictions very take the list at a very credible level and prepare for these other things to happen, and then they do not happen. Now, this goes back to the early 50s as far as reports of interactions and communications from these creatures. They also have given a number of contradictory explanations to various abductees for the same procedures or the same part of the agenda. For instance, and as I talk about this in Taken, one woman was shown at one point during some of her encounters a cloned copy of her body. It was inert. And well, this happens in a number of cases. Many people have reported seeing inert human bodies. Sometimes copies of themselves, sometimes not, just other bodies. And one case, Pat was told that these bodies were for the resurrection. Now, throughout Pat's experiences, a religious symbology was employed with her because it was she had a very strong basic faith.
By the way, is it your view that those who start out with a very strong religious faith attribute their experience to some sort of religious occurrence?
I think they may tend to, and I think that tendency is greatly amplified by the programming of the aliens themselves. They'll take on whatever guise works or follow whatever procedure really accomplishes their program.
Let me take it from their point of view for a second. Why do you think that these beings are not connected to what we think of as traditional religion in some way? A lot of religious people will say, well, these are devils, or they're angels, or they're spirits, and this is not an area we should be even looking into.
Well, my personal answer would be that they do not behave in the reports we have from abduction accounts anything like, or very seldom anything like, any of the reports of spirits and angels in our religious literature that these people use as the basis of their beliefs, for one thing. As I've said before, I have never yet found anywhere in the Bible where one of the angel's duties was a rectal probe on a 6-year-old child.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
All right, now that's a starting place for questioning that. Secondly, the entire range of their procedures with us make that very suspect. The physical activities are numerous, and nothing like this seems related to a spiritual agenda, if that's what they were pursuing. I will agree that they indoctrinate and program us throughout these encounters, if that's going to be effective with us, to take it on a spiritual level. For instance, with Pat, when they first abducted her entire family back in 1954, the creatures told her that, she said, "Are you angels?" And they said, "Yes, but not as you have been taught."
Oh, boy.
You know, but that works with Pat. In another case, with Lisa, she was also shown a clone of her body. And she was not told anything about a spiritual use for this when the resurrection, when Jesus returns and we get our new bodies. No, she was told instead that this body, well, it was used in a sense to threaten or warn her that if she were not cooperative with the ongoing program of whatever it is they're doing with her, that she could be replaced by this body and no one would ever know the difference. Those are not consistent answers.
I wonder how many of us have been replaced.
Dr. I.D.E. Thomas is one of a long line of Welsh preachers. He is currently the senior pastor at the First Baptist Church of Maywood, California, and has authored several books which have enjoyed wide circulation. In his book, The Omega Conspiracy, Dr. Thomas explains the phenomenon of unidentified flying objects and offers an explanation that could identify the beings who operate them. As incredible as his explanation may sound, let us regard the ancient saying of Heraclitus, who 500 years before Christ said, "Because it is sometimes so unbelievable, the truth escapes becoming known."
The answer to all this and the clue to this cosmic riddle may be found in the ancient book of Genesis. And back there in chapter 6, we are told of a very amazing and bizarre event. The sons of God saw the daughters of men and saw that they were beautiful, and they lusted after them. And then we read they married them and sired children from them. For the past 1,500 years, most scholars, including evangelical scholars, have interpreted the sons of God as the good sons of Seth, and the daughters of men as the wicked daughters of Cain. They've adopted that interpretation because the other one is so bizarre and outlandish. The ancient interpretation, and in my opinion the correct one, is that the sons of God were demonic beings or fallen angels, and that they came down to earth, they lusted after the daughters of men, they married them, and produced this amazing progeny, this hybrid progeny of the Nephilim. And the very word Nephilim does not mean giants. It comes from the root Nephal, fallen ones. The early Christian fathers in the first 4 centuries, men like Irenaeus, Tertullian, Ambrose, for 400 years they knew no other interpretation except that the sons of God were angelic beings. Josephus, the cosmopolitan Jewish historian, says the same thing. We read in the book of Job that when God laid the foundation of the earth, the sons of God shouted for joy. Obviously, the sons of God could not be human beings. Adam had not been created. If this was a case of just mixed marriages between good men and wicked women, it is surprising that God should have issued the fire of judgment that he did. God took this stern action of wiping out the human race. Now, the only family that were left intact in order to re-establish, repopulate the new world was the family of Noah. Noah, we are told, was perfect in his generations. The word perfect does not mean, in this case, morally perfect, because we know from the story of Noah, and especially what happened after the flood, that Noah was not perfect. What it means is like a lamb for the paschal sacrifice, that lamb had to be without blemish, physically pure, without blemish. So it seems was the case of Noah, the only family that remained uncontaminated from these strange beings that appeared from space. The only line that was pure and clean from God's standpoint to start a new world and a new civilization.
Eminent scientist associated with the French National Council for Scientific Research concludes that UFO behavior is more akin to magic than to physics as we know it, and that modern UFO nuts and the demons of past days are probably identical.